Hello and welcome back. Thanks for watching part 2. I'm John Tendy. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to turn around an audio mix in about 10 minutes. This was from a live club. It was an odd situation, and the difficulties and the setup are explained in part 1. So check that out. In the meantime, we're going to go over the mix, and at the end, I'll have a clip of final edited product. Right now, I'm going to take you to Studio One, and let's get this song mixed. Okay, so even though we recorded this session in Capture, when you double click on the Capture session, it will open up in Studio One, ready for mix. So going down the line, we're going to start with the kick and go track by track and just get a good, quick, solid mix. I inserted the fat channel on every track, and then I have a few little plugins on the master bus, which I'll talk about when I get there. Now, if you don't have PRESONUS hardware or software, the terminology is still the same. And basically, we're not doing math here. We're going to do this mostly by ear. We got to get this out quick. Okay, so on the kick, we have a gate. Let's take a listen. Let's go to a spot where the kick is fairly busy. Now I have it on expand for right now because that gives it somewhat of a soft knee response. Let's check it on the tighter side. Okay, that's a little too tight. Now those of you who are just using straight gate, all you'd have to do is increase your release time. And it's going to have a similar effect. In fact, I might even like that better. On our EQ, I have the EQ disabled right now. I give it a little boost at about 50, not because I want it to sound like a dance record. That frequency doesn't exist. It's just going to give it a little bit of a puff on the bottom. And also, we have a cutoff at about 1.4K. I swept until I found the bottom frequency of the snare, and that's about where I cut it off. So then when I went to the snare, I did a cutoff at around 460 hertz, and I gave it a little boost at about 3.3. For the limiter, we're going to go to the spots that look like he hits the hardest. And that's where we want the limiter to kick in, where he's really hitting hard. Okay, let me remove that picture. It's slowing down the drive. This is not the fault of the program. It's the drive I'm using. I'm using a USB 2.0 drive. I should not have a video running on this drive. Let me turn that off. Now, whatever we lost at the bottom of the snare, some of that will be made up in the overheads because the cutoff is only at about, let's take a look at the frequency, is only at about 215 hertz. And above that, I'm really not dressing it up on top that much. I want that snare to kick out, and that high end of the snare is going to come from the snare mic, not the overheads. And also, there is a Leslie cabinet literally underneath the ride cymbal. Now, the toms can be a real monster because they're only sitting there waiting to be played during fills. And oftentimes, especially in jazz, those toms might sit there for 4 bars, 5 bars before they're even hit. That means those skins are like satellite dishes and they're picking up everything. Toms must be gated. And we're going to find a spot where he gets busy on those toms. See, and you can see all the open space here. Nothing for... oh, God, quite some time, maybe as long as 30 seconds. They have to be gated. So let's look at that spot. Okay, now in the middle, I see those little bumps. That's probably snare hits. Now, if we didn't have a gate on this, we'd have 2 skins rumbling, as you can hear, rumbling through that whole section. So they must be gated. As far as EQ, take a little off the bottom if you choose to do so. It's not really an issue on toms in jazz because they're not playing a lot except during a solo, obviously, that's going to feature a tom. Then you might want to pay attention to that individual section. As you can see, that is going to work for me. Now let's move to the organ. Now the organ can be a real beast, especially in this situation. Organ players like to unplug that slow rotor, and as a result, sometimes that slow rotor is pointing in the wrong direction. You got to put two mics on top. Some people like to put one mic in the back of the Leslie, so that if the rotor is pointing in the wrong direction, the sound is bouncing off the inner wall and will hit the mic. I don't like that because when he does start rotating that horn, it's going to create wind, and that wind is going to hit the microphone. It's not a big deal, but I prefer the stereo image as well as the safety of knowing there's a mic on both sides of that Leslie. Okay, so let's give that a listen. Starting on the bottom, here's the organ bass. Very quickly. Obviously no gate. We're going to compress the bass of the organ. The bottom of the organ is going to have a very interesting EQ. We're going to cut off everything below about 360. The bass has to be a little less dynamic than the rest of the organ. The organ is going up and down in volume with the organ player's volume pedal, and that's what makes a Leslie sound the way it does. However, we need some more consistency with the bass. So the bass, the bottom mic is going to be rolled off at about 300 hertz, 350 hertz, and then we're going to put a limiter on that, as you can see. It's not a lot of limiting. It's just enough to make it a little less dynamic than the top of the organ. And the top of the organ is just, you know, you're going to sensibly roll off some bottom so that you don't get too much rumble. And if you add the two, and that'll work for me. Now, moving on to saxophone. Here's the big secret with saxophone. I'll let you in on a little secret. It's the easiest part of the mix. You really don't have to do much. And here's the reason why. Saxophone has a sound that is going to completely dominate the diaphragm of the microphone. When sound is hitting that microphone from a saxophone bell, nothing's going to bleed in there that's going to be noticeable anyway. It's not going to overdrive it. Obviously, you're going to put the microphone in a sensible place, but you're not going to have the kind of problem with a saxophone mic in a live situation that you would with, let's say, an overhead. So we don't really have to worry too much about that. And since it's one of the solo voices, if you will, one of the melody voices, that's the only one really that we're going to automate levels with, that and maybe the organ when it's soloing. So let's just take a look. This is pretty simple. Here's one of the saxes. Let's listen to saxophone 1, which is Mr. Weldon, where he's soloing. Really not much to do to it. I rolled off a little on the bottom. I gave it a little boost up here, and there was a funny little buzz that I heard at around 4.5K, and I pulled that down a little bit with a fairly narrow Q on that. Okay, and then it's a similar strategy with the other sax. Sounds great. Now, the two of us have different tones. That's good. To try and make them sound the same is just doesn't make sense. The other thing to remember is when you are a musician in a self-produced live situation, which happened to me that night, not by choice, it's just the way it wound up. Don't spend too much time worrying about how good you sound. You're one of a band, and the whole picture has to sound right. If you're going to spend too much time worrying about your tone on your saxophone or your tone on your voice or whatever instrument it is you are playing, the whole project will suffer. If you sound great and the rest of the band doesn't sound great, the project is a failure. So be very, very careful about that. Now, let's listen to the whole thing. Okay, generally I would say it needs a little more overhead in this section. Okay, and so we'll mess around with those, but before we do, let's look at our multi-band dynamics as part of the Studio One package. Is really quite good. Let's turn it on and take a look. Okay, the key here is once you hear it doing what it's supposed to do, you've done too much. You don't want to hear limiting. You don't want to hear multi-band compression. You just want to control the sound. Let's look at our limiter. And then we'll jump around in the song. So in about 7 to 10 minutes, I was able to get a good mix. Now, if I was going to bang my head against the wall trying to come up with something stellar enough that was going to be nominated for a Grammy, given the situation, obviously it wasn't going to happen. But that's okay. It's good audio, it's good picture, it's a solid performance. It's a very good presentation. Here's a short clip from the night, and if you want to see the full performance, follow the link to my other YouTube channel, which focuses primarily on jazz performance. And if you like this video, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.